The entire global economy is currently drowning in over $346 trillion of debt, according to investing.com. To break it down simply, this represents roughly 310% of the world's total GDP. To put it in plain English, as a species, we currently owe 3 times more than we actually produce in a single year. If humanity were a single household, the bank would have foreclosed on us decades ago. But here is the paradox that keeps economists up at night and leaves the average person scratching their head in confusion. If every major superpower is broke, if every developing nation is buried under a mountain of IOUs, and if even the wealthiest empires are sprinting toward a fiscal cliff, who are we actually paying back? Think about it. If the United States owes trillions, and China owes trillions, and the UK, Japan, and Germany are all in the red, where is the money actually going? Are we in debt to Martians? Is there a secret room of trillionaires sitting on the dark side of the moon waiting to collect? Or perhaps we've just collectively agreed to ignore the fact that the math doesn't add up. Most people feel like the global economy is a fragile house of cards just waiting for a stiff breeze to knock the whole thing down, and honestly, they aren't entirely wrong. Today, we're going to peel back the layers of the global ledger to find the creditor at the end of the world. We're going to look past the spreadsheets and the central bank jargon to see where the buck actually stops. It's not who you think, it's not where you'd expect, and the truth is much more interesting and slightly more terrifying than a simple unpaid bill. Before we dive into the rabbit hole, ask yourself this: what happens to a system that functions entirely on promises that can never be kept? Let's find out. The first place to look for the creditors of the world's superpowers isn't some shadowy overseas boardroom or a secret bunker, it's actually in the mirror. See, most national debt is what economists call domestic debt. Governments don't just go hat in hand to mysterious foreign entities. More often than not, they borrow from their own people. Go ahead and check your pocket. Or more accurately, check your 401k or your pension fund. When you put money into a savings account, pay your monthly life insurance premium, or contribute to a retirement fund, those institutions don't just stack that cash in a vault like Scrooge McDuck. They put it to work. They buy government bonds. Why? Because for the last century, government debt, specifically U.S. Treasuries, has been marketed as the ultimate risk-free asset. It is the bedrock of the global financial system. Think about it. If you have a pension, you are technically a lender to the state. In the U.S., roughly 75% of the total debt is held by domestic actors, ranging from massive mutual funds to your grandmother's savings bonds. This creates a fascinating paradox. When you hear the media shouting about a country being trillions of dollars in debt, what they are actually describing is a massive circular transfer of wealth. It is the government promising to take tax revenue from your future self to pay back your current savings account with interest. It's a closed loop. Have you ever wondered why the system doesn't just collapse under its own weight? It's because we are the system. You aren't just a taxpayer working to pay off a bill. You are a fractional landlord of your own country. You are the bank, the borrower, and the tax collector, all wrapped into one. Every time the government spends, it's essentially taking out a mortgage on your future productivity to pay for your current stability. So, the next time you see a terrifying debt clock ticking up on the news, remember, a huge chunk of those numbers represents the very foundation of your own retirement. You don't just live in the economy, you are the one financing its existence. Now this is where it gets complicated. If most debt is internal, what about the rest? This is what we call international debt, and it's where the global economy starts to look like a high-stakes game of poker. Think of it like a neighborhood where everyone is constantly passing around IOUs. Countries buy each other's debt like trading cards, but these aren't just pieces of paper. They are the glue holding global trade together. Why would China hold trillions in US debt? Or why would the UK and Germany be ramping up their borrowing right now? It's not just about collecting a little bit of interest on the side. It's about leverage and stability. Imagine you're a massive manufacturer like Japan. By holding US dollars or euro-denominated bonds, You aren't just saving for a rainy day. You're stabilizing your own currency to make sure your exports stay competitive. You're also ensuring you have the global gold on hand to buy essential commodities like oil, advanced semiconductors, and food on the open market. Without those bonds, your economy could grind to a halt the moment a supply chain hiccup occurs. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. The math is starting to look ugly. Keep an eye on the clock because by 2026, global sovereign debt is projected to top $100 trillion. To put that in perspective, that's nearly equal to the entire world's annual economic output. Major players like the US and China are currently running deficits exceeding 7% of their GDP. That's double the global average. Ask yourself, how long can you spend twice as much as your neighbors before they start asking questions? We are entering a volatile new era where the neighbors are getting much pickier about whose debt they're willing to hold. If a country's debt to GDP ratio keeps climbing, investors start demanding higher interest rates to compensate for the risk. It's no longer a given that everyone wants your IOUs, and when the world's biggest buyers start looking for the exit, the entire neighborhood feels the heat. We're moving from an era of trust everyone to an era of show me the receipts. Before we hit the biggest twist of all, the one that flips the entire narrative on its head, I need to pause and ask you something that divides the world's top economists. There is a controversial framework called modern monetary theory, or MMT, which effectively argues that as long as a country prints its own currency, national debt isn't the terrifying boogeyman we've been taught to fear. In this world, a government can't go bankrupt, because it can always print the next dollar to pay the bill. Some critics laugh it off as the magic money tree, a dangerous fantasy that ends in hyperinflation, while others call it the only honest way to run a modern economy. Think about it. If we can just create trillions for emergency bailouts or global conflicts without the system collapsing, was the money ever real to begin with? Or are we just building a massive house of cards that's one bad day away from a total meltdown? I want to see where you stand on this. Do you think national debt is a hard physical constraint that will eventually crush our future? Or is it just a clever accounting trick used to manage labor and resources? This isn't just theory, it's the difference between your savings being secure or becoming worthless paper. Drop a comment right now. Type real if you believe the bill always comes due, or trick if you think the rules of money have changed forever. I'm going to be jumping into the thread to read the most compelling arguments, so let's see who can actually back up their side. Now let's peel back the curtain on layer 3, the money printer. This is what economists call intragovernmental debt, but you can think of it as the government reaching into its left pocket to borrow from its right pocket. Except in this case, the right pocket is the central bank, and it has the power to manifest money out of thin air. During the pandemic, we saw this play out on a scale that was frankly unprecedented. The Federal Reserve and the Bank of England didn't just step in. They went on a multi-trillion-dollar shopping spree, vacuuming up their own government's bonds like a high-powered industrial vacuum. They did this to keep the pulse of the economy from flatlining, effectively becoming the buyer of last resort when the rest of the world was terrified. This is the literal money printing you hear people shouting about on news clips, but here is the 2026 update that nobody is talking about. The printers haven't just slowed down. They've been put into reverse. We are entering the era of the unwind. The central banks are now desperately trying to purge those trillions of dollars in bonds back onto the private market. But here's the million-dollar question. Actually, the trillion-dollar question. Who is actually going to buy them? Think about it. For years, the central bank was like a teacher who bought every single piece of homework the students produced, regardless of quality, just to keep the class average up. But now, the teacher has left the room. The students are standing in the middle of a crowded cafeteria, trying to sell that same homework to private investors, hedge funds, and your grandma's pension fund. But these private buyers aren't doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They want a deal. They want higher returns. If these private buyers decide the risk is too high or the reward is too low, they'll walk away. And if they walk away, the government has to hike interest rates even higher just to entice them back to the table. This creates a vicious cycle. We're moving from an era of artificial stability into a cold, hard market reality where every dollar borrowed has to be justified to a skeptical investor. As the Fed pulls back, the safety net disappears. If the private market can't, or won't, absorb this mountain of debt, those interest rates stay sky high, the cost of servicing our national debt explodes, and that house of cards we've been building starts to look less like a metaphor and more like a looming reality. Are we prepared for a world where the money printer finally runs out of ink? So, if this web is so tangled, what happens if it breaks? If one country defaults, does the whole world go dark? Not necessarily. Here is the nuance you won't hear in the doom and gloom headlines. Not all debt is created equal. While sovereign debt is soaring to levels that make economists sweat, corporate debt is also quietly hitting a staggering $100 trillion. But before you panic, look at where that money is actually going. This isn't just wasteful spending or a black hole of bureaucracy. Think of it as the $100 trillion engine fueling the AI revolution and the global transition to clean energy. These are what we call productive investments. When a tech giant borrows $5 billion to build a massive data center that eventually generates $20 billion in revenue, that debt isn't a burden. It's high-octane fuel. It's the same logic for nations. When a country borrows to build a high-speed rail network or a modern port that slashes shipping times, they aren't just spending money, they are buying future GDP. But here is the catch, and it's a big one. The danger isn't the raw number on the screen, it's the gap. If your debt is growing at 49%, but your economy is only expanding at 46%, you aren't just standing still, you are actively losing ground every single day. Imagine running on a treadmill that's slowly accelerating while you're starting to tire. That's the tightrope we're walking. Can we outrun the interest rates? Can the productivity from AI arrive fast enough to pay off the loans used to build it? We aren't looking at a fragile house of cards that collapses if you sneeze on it. Instead, we are watching an Olympic-level balancing act where the stakes are the entire global standard of living. The question isn't whether the debt is too high, but whether the world we're building with that money will be valuable enough to pay for itself before the bill comes due. So, who is the creditor? It's not a single entity, it's a collective we. It's your retirement fund, it's the central bank across the ocean, and it's the private investor betting on the next tech giant. In the modern world, debt isn't the bill at the end of the meal, it is the meal. It's the mechanism we use to pull future prosperity into the present. The system is shifting. From the US and China's massive deficits to emerging markets like Mexico and Poland finding their footing, the debt paradox is just the sound of a global engine running at redline. The question isn't, when will we pay it back? The question is, can we keep growing fast enough to stay ahead of it? If you want to know how this impacts your own wallet and the future of your savings, make sure to watch our deep dive on the Great Devaluation right here. See you in the next one.